Yeah.
I still very much bonded with the idea that helping others helps yourself, and that even though you might have gifts and pleasurable lifestyle now, there's no guarantee that'll happen in the future. And so it's best for us to take care of those who have the least now as a way to ensure that if ever we're in that situation ourselves, either through a natural disaster or a misplaced trust in someone that ends up taking away all of what we thought we had, I want to live in a society where those people are provided for.
Yeah.
So it's partially selfish, really, that I want to be somewhere and in a group, in a community that will have my back. So I have to give someone else that trust now, in the hope that it'll be brought back to me.
Welcome to the Americas Podcast, where we pursue what it means to become a next level neighbor, creating a place we enjoy with the people we love. Today, I am joined by Zac Monnier. Zac works at the Habitat for Humanity for the headquarters as a support specialist here in Americas. Zac, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
I'm so stoked to get started. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, glad to have you. Zac, you moved actually into Americas in 2021 in June. So we're kind of new to the area, both of us. So tell me a little bit, what actually brought you here?
Yeah, so I was working for a local habitat organization in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and I had spent the last 10 years of my life living in that lovely city. And I saw there was an opening with International, Habitat for Humanity International, and I worked my butt off to try and get that post. And they said they wanted me and offered to help me move down here. And I got here in June 2021.
Wow, that's awesome.
It was a crazy experience.
That's great. That's great. So let's go back. Let's go back a little bit about where you were born. What was your family dynamics like? Share with us, what was it like growing up as Zac, as a kid, as a youth, young adult? Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so even though I'm new to Americas, the story of a rural place out in the middle of everything is pretty familiar to me. I grew up in a place called Adams County, which is actually Gettysburg's the county seat there.
Okay.
And just replace all of the peanut fields and pine forests with dairy cows and apple orchards. But it's the same exact narrative. We would have the first day of hunting season off to go hunt. I was a bit of a nerd, so I didn't really join up with that, but it was still cool to have a day off of school. And we would even have a thing where we would drive our tractors to school as just a random stunt sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, pretty similar. Mom and dad, 2 little sisters. My mom's side of the family was from South Central Pennsylvania. We got a lot of Irish and German roots. And my dad met my mom in Houston, Texas, but he's from Omaha, Nebraska.
Okay.
So yeah, it's been...
Was that a work or family thing that he was there for?
They both had different reasons for being in Houston, but Dad, and he's going to probably kill me if he hears about this, but he actually asked one of my mom's coworkers out first, and she politely told him no, but I have this coworker who is single and might say yes, and lucky for us, they did. So yeah. And then they moved back once they tied the knot. So I've lived in Pennsylvania for most of my life, and it was quite an experience to say farewell. My mom was happy I got the promotion, but moving 700 plus miles away was hard on her.
Yeah. Did you enjoy growing up in a rural area, or did you want to be a big city guy in that rural spot, or what was that like for you?
I really wanted more in life because I felt kind of stifled in a small rural area. I felt like I needed more than what I had. And it's with hindsight that I've learned that it wasn't exactly what I needed, but I couldn't wait to get my driver's license and a car because unlike Americas, I was 30, 40 minutes away from a lot of different places. York, Lancaster, Gettysburg, Hershey were all within an hour's drive. Baltimore was 3, DC was 3, Philly was an hour and a half, all by car. It's funny, Americans measure distance in time driven.
Yep.
Not miles or kilometers. It's how far is it? 25 minutes. So if I just wait here for 25 minutes, it'll come to me. What are you saying? It's very confusing for people who aren't from here.
And that is very correct. Yes, that is funny. So where was the first place you went to when you got your car and you got your driver's license? Do you remember? Like, what did you do?
Well, my dad had to teach me how to drive, and of course, it was a stick shift, and I had to do it the hard way.
Yep.
So my father thought it was a wise decision. And again, I don't mean to be ragging on my father. I love him tremendously and couldn't say enough about how much he means to me. But in this instance, he took me to a old logging road that went up the side of one of the Appalachian Mountains, all gravel, very little shoulder to speak of, and then had me do a 3-point turn in a 5-speed PT Cruiser. And I swear I didn't make it to my 17th birthday for a second there. I was right on the edge and almost crashed. But yeah, School of Hard Knocks, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's right.
But once I finally knew how to ride and could do it on my own, I think the first place I went to was Gettysburg, just because there's a lot of really great trails through there that are better done by car because it's a very, very big battlefield. And so I would just ride around and look at the historical markers and just geek out for an afternoon.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So you're young, growing up. You've kind of mentioned, okay, I'm a nerd, or at least that's, what was it like? What were your relationships like? What was your social life like?
So one of the tricky things about a small rural high school is you have a box and you have to stay in that box and you can't really go outside of it. So I was delegated to the marching band and chess club boxes, which they were nice boxes, but I wish I could have done sports, honestly, looking back at it.
Which one in particular?
Baseball.
Baseball.
Yeah, I did it in Little League, but all the adults were shouting at each other all the time, and it felt very toxic. So eventually I fell out of love with the sport. But if I could go back and do it again, I've met some great college students down here that are in the baseball team, and they're just so good, like so wholesome. They don't wear airs about being in the sport, and just really nice people altogether. There's a fellow specifically I'll call out. His name was Bryce, and I'm bad at pronouncing his last name, so I'm not going to try it here. But Bryce was a next door neighbor to me when I moved down here, and he made the transition a lot easier.
Wow.
So yeah, if I could go back, I would break out of those marching band and chess club boxes and try sports again, because you learn a lot of camaraderie, overcoming obstacles, doing the hard work when you really don't want to. You have to do a lot of physical activity just to stand on a pitch for a bit.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, I've got respect for them. I didn't in high school because again, you wear the blinders that you're set with.
That's right.
But yeah, good people.
Yeah. What position did you play?
I was a lefty.
Okay.
So I had, what was it? First base was a lot of fun, but third base was too.
Yeah.
Basically, they never expected you to be able to be where you were as a lefty, especially in the small teams.
Yeah.
I wish I could have done pitching, but I just wasn't able to throw well enough for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, mostly
third
first
base,
and third.
man, you got to have an arm for third base, man. So that's
true. But I mean, it was pretty low in the league, so most people didn't make it to third anyway.
Yeah. That's right. That's good. Okay, so yeah, so you're going through that. What about, where was your headspace in regards of career? What did you want to do? Who did you want to be?
Well, you're a pastor. I wanted to be a chaplain in the Army.
Okay.
Because in that culture, you're taught that there are two things that are really, really important: God and country. And I thought I could serve both by being a chaplain. I grew up in the Lutheran tradition. The only church in town was Lutheran. And I was confirmed, and my pastor gave me like his school that he went to, Valparaiso University. And I got a full scholarship with the Army ROTC program there. They were a sub branch of the Fighting Irish at Notre Dame.
Okay.
So once a week we would go to Notre Dame and join up with a wider battalion to do different training exercises. I wish I could say I was a better student. So I didn't manage to achieve that dream in the end, but I had some great memories that I made there, and nothing but
Yeah.
respect for the ROTC program. Notre Dame, even though they're a Catholic school, I still had great love for them.
Yeah.
And it was good to have a Lutheran college next to a Catholic college because I don't know if you're familiar, but the 95 Theses that Martin Luther put on the Gutenberg, not Gutenberg, I'm sorry, forgive me, Wittenberg, where he posted them on for the annual anniversary of that, a bunch of nerdy theology majors would leave Valparaiso in the cover of darkness, go to the Basilica at Notre Dame.
Okay.
And I'm not going to name any names because I value their friendships too much, but we would duct tape the 95 Theses onto the Basilica door.
Oh my gosh.
Take a quick selfie
Yeah.
and then dip out.
Run out. Yeah. Yeah. That's probably when selfies were just coming out too. I mean, that's a big deal,
Yeah,
man.
Facebook had come out. I went to school in 2008 was my college start. So Facebook had come out just a few years prior to that. But yeah selfies were just becoming a thing.
Yeah. So, okay. So you're doing this, you're being a part, you're getting into some community. You shared a little bit about how important some of that season of your life was. What was some experiences that kind of helped create either some values that you still hold on today, or did they just reinforce some of the values that you learned from, parents and things like that? So while you were there
Yeah. So I learned a lot about who I needed to become through the mistakes I made. There's an author I love, Sir Terry Pratchett. He's no longer with us, but he created a voluminous work of fantasy books called the Discworld series.
Wow, okay.
I have so many books that have been lost to time and bathroom readings just a great series, very cheap. Definitely recommend getting into it. Okay. But a quote from him was, wisdom comes from experience. Experience is often the direct result of a lack of wisdom. In other words, you grow wise through the mistakes you make. You can't have wisdom before that. So going to a college hundreds of miles away from my any social networks and support groups, leaving everyone I knew behind because I had to go do something different. I had to be someone. I had to serve God and country, and I needed to do it all right now. I learned a lot about why that wasn't possible for me. Later on in life, I ended up learning I have ADHD and that it causes a lot of issues with task regulation and figuring out what inputs to take and what to set aside, and just how to be a good student, really. Yeah. And when you're in high school and you're relatively clever, you can ignore the homeworks and the readings and still ace the tests from a cram session the night before. And as long as you're a good person, polite, and not making any fuss for the teachers, you can get by. Army ROTC is not a program you can coast in. Yeah. We had 5 a.m. I'm getting goosebumps just remembering it. 5 a.m. physical training sessions where the major, who was 3 decades older than you, could smoke you at every exercise. I don't know how he did it, honestly. I tried to join a fraternity. I was in the honors program at the Christ College for the school. You had to do readings. You had to show up to classes. You had to talk about those readings. And it just snowballed to a point where I couldn't recover. I had to rely on the kindness of my parents and came back hat in hand, very upset with myself, not understanding why I had failed when I had thought I could do it. And one of the things about undiagnosed ADHD is you often get told, oh, you're so smart. You're so able to come up with new ideas. If only you could commit to something, if only you could follow through. And so you're left with a sense that you're not living up to others' expectations and that you're failing society as a whole, which is a really tough thing for someone who thought he was hot stuff in high school. So I spent most of my early 20s trying to find a part of myself that I could keep and parts that I needed to set aside or grow from. And even now that I'm 32, I'm still in the act of learning who I am and how I can be better. So, you're never finished, you're never finished learning. You always have to try and improve yourself. And part of that comes from book learning, but also a lot of it just comes from life experience. And being around others who have different life experiences than your own.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't until I moved to Harrisburg where I realized a lot of the conceptions I had built up in my small rural community of mostly white people was I didn't know a lot about the world, especially the lived experience of other people. And that's doubly true now that I'm a Yankee living in the very heart of Georgia.
Yeah.
When I moved here, I did a lot of reading. I went to the local library, picked up my card, got registered, and just read book after book about local history.
Yeah.
Just so I wouldn't put my Yankee foot somewhere where it shouldn't step, you know?
Yeah.
But I still find myself engaging with people who look like me far easier than people who don't. And that's something I'm still working on, honestly.
Yeah. I remember I was born in Germany, military family, and we were always close knit as a family because we're always just moving. And so my assumption was everything always changes. So I just got to ask all these questions because it's hard for me to assume anything because I don't know. Things will change. You know, I go to one school and they're learning something completely different than what I was learning before. And so I'm having to catch up, and then we move again, and relationships change so rapidly. And then I come to, live in the South where everything is 150 years old and everyone knows everybody, and you should kind of know a little bit more about what's going on. And so it is kind of a culture shock for me of, people just kind of finding those. It is a lot easier to kind of find maybe your group, maybe people that look like you, talk like you, act like you, and trying to find that's really what we're doing is we're kind of finding people that are a lot like us, and because we like us so much. Yeah,
it's easier to imprint with that person. Yeah. It's easier to have empathy for that person because you have shared experiences. I mean, that's what half of friendships are built on. Oh, you like this sport that I like? Oh, great. Yeah. Oh, you're into this video game that I'm into? Super. I mean, look at Reddit. Yeah. That's all subgroups, and you can spend an eternity in that one subgroup and have plenty of fun. Yeah. But you'll never be challenged. You'll never be asked to think of something outside of what you're familiar with or what might make you uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's even when we're talking about neighboring well together. And part of this podcast is helping us to consider, oh, wait a minute. Am I building relationships around things that are just about me, or am I building relationships for the sake of others? Even being married, I mean, I could be married for myself and the things that I can get from marriage, or I can be married to my wife for her and for her growth and for her enjoyment as well. And so when I'm not getting what I want, or when she doesn't want to do the things that I want to do, I'm not leaving because I'm not getting what I want. I'm like, well, part of it is actually serving her. Like, what does she want? And so those are some really deep relationships when you get to a place where there's a lot of things that we disagree with,
sure,
but we can still be friends because it's not just about what I'm okay with. It's about the wonderment of the person that I don't know. Why? How did you get to that conclusion? Why are you like this? And it's different, but that's the point where it grows instead of just going, I just kind of like me, and I'm just going to keep being around people that are just like me. That's really, really hard to kind of get to that conclusion and then just open up a little bit more. So, but I think neighboring is a part of that. And I think that, just continuing to engage in relationships and just try, like you said, it's about experience. You got to try. You're going to say things that are going to probably offend people, and you don't mean to, but you just got to try. So I'm very thankful for that. So, okay. So here you are, you're coming back. Your family is, you're being brought back into that. How do you get connected from there to something like Habitat for Humanity?
Yeah. So the first half of my 20s were all spent trying to recover. I managed to get an associate's degree in business administration. I worked all types of difficult jobs that did not pay well enough. But I worked them because I needed money and I wanted to get out of my parents' house and have my own apartment. So eventually that brought me to Harrisburg as a way to try and get my bachelor's degree, but also they had a big enough job market that I could hopefully get a state job, because Harrisburg is the capital of Pennsylvania. And roughly half of the jobs in the city are state worker jobs, which are known to be very stable, great benefits. And once you're in the system, it's very hard to screw up enough to be kicked out.
Yeah.
Not that I plan to do that, but I had a track record. So I wanted to make sure I was very cautious. And it took a few years to actually get my foot into state government. My first state job was a clerk typist at Little Buffalo State Park, which was a 45-minute drive out of the city into Perry County, which gets a lot of the same country bumpkin jokes that you might hear from like West Virginia and things like that. I have family in Perry, so I'm not going to make those jokes. Yeah. But it was a long drive and the pay was poo, but I was able to get the clerk typist 1 job, and then that led to a job as a clerk typist 2 for the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board, which is another foreign entity to y'all down here because your liquor laws aren't insane. Pennsylvania's are a bit different. So
In what way?
That. Well, so after the prohibition was repealed, each state was asked to build a set of laws that made sense to it. The governor of Pennsylvania at the time, his name was Pinchot. He was a great conservationalist. Many of the state parks of Pennsylvania are attributed to him. So he wasn't all bad, but he thought that buying liquor should be as difficult and as expensive as possible. So he created the state store system.
Wow, okay.
Which at the time it was first conceived, you literally had to talk to a man at the clerk desk and say, I want that bottle of that whiskey behind that double pane lead glass and bars, and you have to go to the back stock room to pick it up for me. It's gotten a lot better since then. Yeah. The fine wine and good spirit stores are really, really nice. And they pay their employees well because they're state employees. So they have holidays and pension. Well, not pensions, but good retirement packages. So I really do like that about them, but it's still very difficult to understand. Okay, I can buy beer at this place, but not wine and liquor. And this grocery store can sell beer, but only because of a 2020 law or 2017 law that just made it where they can get a license. It's a whole mess.
Yeah.
But my job.
Welcome to Georgia.
Yeah. My job was trying to help people understand what that mess, how to navigate that mess. So I did like call center work for a few years there.
Yeah.
And then that led me to the banking and securities legal department. Great people. They went after really unscrupulous lenders who would do like car loans that were super predatory, and you would lose your. And one thing that I've learned throughout my life is being poor is bloody expensive. You have to take out loans that cost interest, while as if you have money, you can put away money that gains you interest. You have payday lending, you have cash checking and money orders, and all these other small little transactions that steadily eat away at the very small amount of money you have to begin with. And then you can't buy the really good set of shoes. You have to buy the cheap boots that will need to be bought again in 2 years, while as people who have more money can buy that one pair that lasts them their whole life. It's tough. I was never in that position with my family. We didn't make a lot of money, but we had enough to afford to feed everybody and maybe send them off on a vacation once every so often. But I've learned that being low income is just not a fair break by any means. So anyway, I rambled.
No, that's good. That's good. Well, I mean, but even in that conversation, like so you're sharing this, and I could see in you, like, it burdens you that people have to do that, like that people have to go through that. Where does that come from? Why do you care? And the other guy down the street's like, well, too bad for them. Like, where does that come from?
So it's a lot easier to just look after yourself, right? And there's a lot to do just to take care of yourself. You've got to go work out. You've got to eat the right foods. You've got to go to the right job at the right time. If you have a family, you have their needs to consider. So I understand why people might insulate themselves a bit and cast off others as, well, it's their own fault. They're like that. Or, I would never be in that position. If I were them, I would figure out a way out of it. Just to live life like that is more comfortable and requires less brain power, which, because of how hard life is, I'm not saying that that's the wrong way to live, but I have a lot of extra energy with ADHD. So I'm allowed to spend some of that on thinking about others. And I have no family that I have to take care of. I have steady income. So these types of things are things I can focus on. Yeah. But in my earlier life, I had to just focus on making enough money to afford an apartment. Yeah. So, but anyway, the reason that I have that type of drive is attributed partly to my my parents. I was raised in the Lutheran church. I was taught that love for others is as important, if not more, than love for yourself. I really took those concepts to heart. I still struggle with Christianity's theological concepts because when you're a theology major, you're bombarded with readings and writings from thousands of people trying to figure out the answers to life's mysteries.
Yeah.
And it can get pretty confusing for a 17-year-old kid. And I'm still confused at 32. But I still very much bonded with the idea that helping others helps yourself, and that even though you might have gifts and pleasurable lifestyle now, there's no guarantee that'll happen in the future. And so it's best for us to take care of those who have the least now as a way to ensure that if ever we're in that situation ourselves, either through a natural disaster or a misplaced trust in someone that ends up taking away all of what we thought we had, I want to live in a society where those people are provided for.
Yeah.
So it's partially selfish, really, that I want to be somewhere and in a group, in a community that will have my back. So I have to give someone else that trust now in the hope that it'll be brought back to me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's, man, it's amazing to see that drive and that heart for people. It's so important because I mean, and especially even with, your personality. I mean, I go through my Facebook feed and I just get tired sometimes because there's so many emotions. I mean, I'm going from they just had a baby to this person just died to, this person just graduated to there's a natural fire and hundreds of people lost their homes. And I'm just trying to process all of that. And I do think that that's why, being local can be very beneficial for everyone, because there are things that are happening on a local level that are very detrimental, and there's trauma. And so you can almost grasp those things, where I look at something that's happening in Minnesota or in other places. I'm like, I mean, I can barely get my own people in my own city. Like, how do I do that? And I think that we should do both. But just the reality that, that you're put in a position and with a personality that's able to kind of absorb some of that a little bit more and have that, and then help to mobilize some of those things. I think that's really great. So, Thanks. Man, I'm glad you're here in Americus. I'm glad you're doing some great work. So you're working in Pennsylvania. How do you get connected to Habitat from there?
Yeah. So you mentioned I was frustrated with the system I found working for state government.
Yeah.
I couldn't leave state government at the time because the benefits were great and I had found stability and security for the first time in my adult life. So if I can't leave the state, but I see that there's still needs not being addressed in my city, what do? Volunteer. So in Harrisburg, there's a phenomenal group called the Harrisburg Young Professionals. And I later came to learn of another group called the Young Professionals of Color, Harrisburg Young Professionals of Color. And both groups, tremendous. But that let me kind of have a release valve for my soul, if you will, where I could directly impact the community I lived in. I would do things like tree planting in the city. I would organize community garden tours where we would create a network of local community gardens and show young professionals what they look like, encourage them to take part in it. And that led me one thing to another. And I ended up volunteering with Habitat for Humanity and liked it a lot. But not enough to leave until I saw that there was a position with the Restore in Harrisburg as the assistant manager.
Okay.
And that let me use the few years I had built up from volunteering in conjunction with my 5 or so years with the state to then shift to the nonprofit sector.
Okay.
Was not an easy choice.
Yeah.
I had to give up. I was one of the few employees at the end of the pension cycle. So I was actually still able to qualify for a pension if I wanted it. And that's unheard of for a millennial. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Yes, it's still a millennial, 1990. So I make the cut.
Yeah.
But the issue was I just wasn't happy. I wasn't happy there in the state government. So it was worth losing a pension and some security and even taking a pay cut to work for Habitat at the local level. And I loved it. The Restore is an amazing place.
Yeah, I think that's so encouraging too, because I mean, there are people that, work is hard. If you're really working, it's going to be hard. And if you work in retail or some form of volunteer, you deal with people, and people are just, they're like me. They're just super messy,
Yes.
And a lot of times when people come to you and talk to you, they're not coming to you necessarily to greet you and give you a whole bunch of just good encouragement. It's probably to do something with it, something they don't understand, or an issue that's going on, or maybe they're offended by something. And so they're coming to you with that. And so it can be, it can be draining, but at the same time, if that's where you need to be, if that's where you feel like, man, this is where I'm finding the joy in my work, being able to take that sacrifice, I think, is a really big deal. And I always try to encourage people that are in a position where it's like, look, I'm making money, I'm all this, but you have to consider that, right?
So, I wish I could say America rewarded that type of selfless behavior, but you'll find for any nonprofit, churches, non-government organizations, whatever, you can be an executive director of that local nonprofit, and maybe you'll make $60,000 to $80,000 a year, which is decent money. But in the for-profit sector, you could be making quadruple or more than that with benefits and stock bonds and things. So if you're going to school at a institution of higher learning, and a really good one too, like an Ivy League type of school, and you're worth $300,000 a year to someone, you're not going to work at that nonprofit that you care about. Instead, you'll donate a portion of your money to that nonprofit. You're now on the board of directors, and you're telling that poor executive director how to do their job. That's just how we're built in this country.
Yeah.
It's not a perfect system, and it definitely needs some work, but I still find it more rewarding there. So I can see my actions causing directly good impact on people's lives. And state government, while it's really crucial, and I wish it was more appreciated in this nation, it's a lot harder to find that type of satisfaction, because it is very, very difficult to feel like you're making a difference. It's just the gears move slower in state government. It's definitely important, but honestly, if you want to make a difference in your community, state is good, local is better.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that's, again, going back to just the niche of this podcast. It's, getting out to your neighbor and just getting a chance to know someone, seeing that, oh, look, they've got some balloons. Maybe there's a baby that was born. Maybe there's a death in the family, and just getting connected with some of our local neighbors, which, Americus does a really good job at that. So it's one of the highlights of Americus. I feel like there's this neighborly feel to it.
Yeah.
But it helps, because then it makes you engage in and start caring for others on a very small scale and say, hey, I can double this up. I can do this. And how do we get 5 people on this, 10 people on this? Oh, there's an organization that's already doing it. Why don't I start serving there?
Right.
So
don't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
Find someone that's already doing the work.
That's amazing work, man. That's great. All right. So now you're working with Habitat. And you've already mentioned this is in the middle of kind of COVID is when you start thinking about Americus and you start kind of wanting to see that transition, or?
Yeah. So the Restore had to close down for a bit because Pennsylvania was pretty strict with how they were dealing with the pandemic. And I'm not going to touch that with a 6-foot social distance pole, but gave me time to think. So kept growing my hair out and figuring, okay, what does the future look like here? Because I was working for a small Habitat, which means maybe 5 employees altogether. And there wasn't that much in the way of upward promotion. And I was making okay money, but not enough to really start a family. And I was coming up in my late 20s. And I said, okay, well, what do I do? And I was I was in my 30s by that point. And I started looking at trying to apply elsewhere. And then I saw International was hiring. And I was like, well, I'm really happy at the Restore, but I feel like I can't do much more than what I've already done. I spent a lot of work bringing that store around. It was in bad shape. So I had already done all of that, kind of pushed myself to as far as I could go. I wasn't getting support that I felt I was getting support from the board. So it's like, okay, let's start looking elsewhere. And I actually had a role model to do this. lady named Lindsay Kirkwood.
Okay.
Had been a restore manager at that store years before myself. I had heard legends of this person. And they said, she had ended up going up elsewhere and working for other affiliates, and she's now working for International. I was like, okay, that's what I can do. And thanks to her kind of like blueprint, I was able to really go after this job. And it was difficult making the decision to leave Harrisburg behind because I had put down roots. I had spent years on committees, and I was even on the planning commission. So I was approving multi-million-dollar projects for like the blueprints and seeing it before anyone else did. And I get really nerdy about city planning.
Yeah.
So I felt great there. I just wasn't making enough to really like settle down completely. So I decided to take on this job, and Harrisburg was great, but Habitat offered a tremendously, what's the word I'm looking for? Generous package to help me with the move.
Yeah.
I mean, they even paid for the movers to take all my stuff down.
That's great.
Most of the stuff I had bought from the restore. So it made it a lot easier to make the call. But Americus is amazing.
Yeah.
Really complex history. And again, there was some things I saw here that I had recognized from my own upbringing. So it was a good test case. Can I do this? And if I can do this here, can I go internationally one day and travel across the globe?
Yeah. Yeah. So okay. So you get here, and you already mentioned you kind of went to the library, started kind of diving in. I would assume, that you recognize that this was where it started. You're like, all right, man, this is really cool. It's not just a branch. It's kind of where it's kind of the roots are for that. What did you learn about Americus? What were your expectations from the reading? Let's just go there. So you can kind of talk a little bit about that, but like from reading Americus to walking the streets of Americus and meeting people, especially with Habitat being there, international people coming from all over the world throughout the years. Like, what was that expectation of the history, and what were some things that you were excited about coming into and saying, okay, things are changing?
Yeah, you say change. When I moved here, it was palpable that this town was in flux, that something was not stable, that something was shifting. And part of that was the pandemic. I mean, it was 2021, but it drug on for quite a while. So I was told we would be reopening the office any day now, and I was told that for months. And now we're on a flex schedule, so a lot of times the office is quite empty. And it's just me on a cubicle with nobody else around, which is very weird. But I would walk the streets. I don't drive much anymore. I prefer small forms of transportation, like electric skateboards and things like that. So that gives you a unique perspective on a cityscape because you're walking sidewalks instead of driving cars, and the infrastructure is not there for walking. So I see parts of Americus that people who've lived here their whole lives are like, wait, really? That's a thing? Where is that? So walking and biking and roller skating, whatever, has lent me a unique perspective into the current Americus that I find. And reading all of those local history books taught me a bit more about how it got to this state. And when I couple that with my city planning efforts back in Harrisburg, I see a lot that needs to happen, but also a lot of things that are already underway. And that excites me.
Yeah, that is great. That is great. I've been to a couple of the city forums, and it's very it is very complex because there are certain people that obviously they care about only a few things, whether it is infrastructure or someone's like, I don't run those roads, but I go to this school, or you know what I mean? And so everyone's kind of vying for that same kind of pocket of money or whatever it is, or influence or leadership. And this, this town is, depending again, kind of what roads you're walking. I like to walk a few times. And it's really, really great. And when I get really kind of in the mood of like, I just feel like I'm stuck. Like sometimes you probably have done this before. I was just like, I'll just lay on the floor. And I'll just be like, I need to look up. Like you just need a different perspective sometimes.
Yeah, those 13-foot ceilings are pretty nice.
Yeah. So here we are, and you're in Americus, and you're seeing some of these things take place. What is what are some things that are happening right now with Habitat for Humanity that get you really excited about being a part of this great history, starting in Americus and just continuing to move out?
Yeah, so just like everything else, Habitat has a complicated history with the city of Americus. We branched off of Koinonia Farm, which itself wasn't exactly welcome in Sumter County for quite a few decades. So when Habitat first started, we had that shadow that we had to manage. Then Habitat became huge. We're in 70 countries in all 50 states, and we have affiliates, thousands of them. So, well, now that's something to brag about as a person from Americus, which does not have an official title yet. We need to fix that. But that changed. And then with the early 2000s and Millard Fuller parting ways, then there's a change to move our international offices to Atlanta. So now all of these houses that were owned by Habitat are sold off. You have the International Village, which is now no longer International Village and will be something new, thanks to One Sumter. And there's this question of, so what is Habitat to Americus at this point?
Yeah.
If everybody's working from home and we're starting to recruit more and more talent from across the country that doesn't have to move here to work for us, what is Habitat's role in the cityscape and just the wider community that is Sumter County and Americus? And honestly, my pay is not high enough to give you an answer to that. But I hope that we can continue to change the literal scape of Americus. What that can look like varies tremendously, but Habitat itself is going through quite a lot of changes on the national level because the cost of housing is just way too high.
Yeah.
And we're not building enough. I mean, we're building thousands of homes, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
After the 2008 financial crisis, Habitat was, I think, the 5th biggest building company in the entire country.
Wow.
Because when there's a depression, all the regular trades stop building and Habitat can build more. We don't have to fight over the contractors and the building supplies, and we can grow our building. And people see the need, so they give more. We found that during the pandemic too, when people were literally stuck in their homes, at least they had homes to be stuck in. And so there was a great uptick of personal giving to Habitat in our mission because they knew how valuable housing was.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people that didn't have that luxury. But anyway, what excites me about Habitat is that we're willing to have these hard conversations about how does the Habitat model work? Can we keep building houses like we used to? If not, what do we do? How do we blend those two without losing a crucial part of who we are? And how do we come to that conclusion, not from a top-down approach, but as a collective with all of these Habitat affiliates across the US, so we're not leaving someone out.
Yeah.
And it's tough work. It is tough work, but I'm happy to be a part of it.
Yeah. And we were talking a little bit before the podcast about how what you do is you focus on making sure that there's resources and that there are affiliations with some of the local chapters that are like working through it. And so, it also takes the volunteers that are working at all these local levels to kind of see where they're at and their pace and what they want to decide to do. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So Habitat's been around for a while, which means a lot of our affiliates have been led by the same people for decades. Many times a local Habitat starts off as a completely volunteer-led organization. Sometimes it stays that way in perpetuity. It never changes, which can be difficult when Habitat International is saying all of these changes need to happen because regulations keep getting passed, the cost of land keeps growing, the needs change, the people who need the help changes. But if the organization can't change to catch up with it, we're going to lose our place. And that's a hard conversation to have with someone who feels like this model has worked for us for decades and we don't want to see a change to it.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, if you're familiar with our U.S. history, there was a period before we were the United States of America where we were a confederated states of America. Not the CSA, not the Civil War, but like our constitutional model was a federated system, which meant the states had all the power. And if the federal government wanted something, they could ask nicely and still be told, no, we're not helping. I'm a Virginian first and an American second. We see that a lot in the affiliate network too, where they are this Habitat first and international is this foreign power that's trying to meddle with them. And we want to be a support to them. We want to share with them the decades of knowledge that we've built up and created this great knowledge library, because we find them repeating the same issues that we've gone through before.
Yeah.
And many of the people who work for Habitat, myself included, worked for local habitats first.
Yeah.
So it hurts to see this schism between the international team and the US affiliate team. And we're working to try and address that. But I still find that there's a feeling that we're not supporting, we're holding them back, or we're putting undue extra steps on them. And they just want to build houses, darn it, you know?
Yeah.
So that's a regular challenge of the job. But I feel like through conversation after conversation, phone calls over emails, you know, Teams video meetings, so they know they're talking to a live person.
That's right.
And I'm not some automaton.
That's right.
It helps a lot with kind of healing those disconnects.
Yeah. One of the things that I loved about the story of Koinonia and even Habitat and kind of how that kind of plays out is the one thing that I kind of recognized was their ability to adapt. So he comes down and they start working with chickens and eggs, and they're selling their eggs. All of a sudden, can't sell any eggs. So what does he decide to do? He starts to do selling pecans, you know, and he starts building out this framework. And then they're like, you know what? Not only do we want to help sharecroppers and work that, we also want to work on homes. And they're just constantly, as things are evolving, they're just constantly staying up.
Yeah.
And so as an encouragement to you all, like it's in your culture to be able to do this. And I think maybe sometimes people forget that. It's like, this is what we do. When we hit a wall, we continue to figure it out. And it's a part of your culture. It's a part of your history within that. So, man, we'll be thinking about you guys. I'll be praying for you guys. It's a really great network, and it's helping a lot of people out. And so I hope you guys can figure out some of those nuances of, okay, how do we continue to do what we've always done, and continue to become innovative, continue to work it out and make it work
and
with
build
the
more
resources that we have. Yeah. And do more than we ever thought that we would ever do, you know? So that's really, really great. So let's talk a little bit about, I was thinking about this too, as far as, you know, we kind of talked a little bit about it already, because some of America's history is this, I'm going to use a very strong word, kind of a disdain for Koinonia, disdain for Habitat, but then all of a sudden, like this embracing of like, man, like this is where we should be going. They were ahead of the curve. Like what we need to be working towards this too. And so what are some things, maybe some misconceptions that people have about Habitat for Humanity, and how do you guys address those if there are?
Yeah. So Habitat, the thing that people seem to know most about us is we were started by Jimmy Carter, and we give houses to people. Neither of those known things are true. Jimmy Carter was really important to making us a household name, but he got involved from a New York build, I think. It was Millard and Linda Fuller that started it. And they, tremendous people. Like you read books about Millard, and it's just this electric personality that absorbs everyone in the room. Really, I wish I could have met him in person myself.
Didn't he have kind of the same story of like leaving a lot behind? Was doing very successful. Said, "Hey, you know, I'm coming in here. I'm doing this." So yeah, I mean, he's got that story too, right?
Yeah. Same verse, a little bit louder because he had a lot more money. But his family life was deeply impacted by his need to succeed in the financial sector. He was very clever, came up with great ideas, was able to make millions off of it, but he was losing his wife, and his family was kind of falling apart. So they went to Koinonia as like a kind of day trip type of thing, and ended up loving the concept so much that they stayed there and moved there. Very similar story. I would say he had more chutzpah than I do, but I do look to him as a role model for sure.
Okay. So misconception is Miller, and Clarence, I think part of the story was, I think he passed away about a year into this project. They were working for it. And so, but then I think it was maybe in the, I don't know, 50s or 60s. And then Jimmy came in, maybe the 70s?
Oh man, I wish I could bring you into the headquarters because there's a wall there.
I bet you there is.
There's a wall that's just like a timeline of every important thing that's happened. But off the cuff, I would say that the misinterpretation or misunderstanding is that we build houses for people. We build houses with people. And we expect them to pay for it in the long term. Now, the difference between us and a traditional financial institution is we're offering them either a mortgage at no interest or at what's called a zero equivalent mortgage, where we offset the interest that would accrue with a secondary mortgage that we forgive. Which can get really technical and confusing. And a lot of our affiliate leaders ask me questions about this too. But we serve families that make usually between 30% and 60% of the area income. So that's low income to very low income. But I'll be honest, some of the hardest calls I have to handle are those of families that don't fall within those lines. Either they make just a bit too much and they still need help because housing is ridiculously expensive and they're paying thousands of dollars for rent. Or they make too little and they don't have enough public assistance, or they have a myriad of medical issues that cause them a lot of financial problems that make it impossible for them to qualify for an affordable mortgage. And that's one of the things about working for any nonprofit, is recognizing that the needs are greater than what you can do on your own. And when I'm in those situations, a crises of faith, if you will, I have to give it up to usually a higher power, but sometimes a senior colleague, to just ask for someone else to take that burden from me, because
it's tough.
Empathy draining. Yeah.
There's I can't remember what the store is called in Florida. It's one of the beaches, but like, I'll just use this as an example. It's like a $9.99 store and everything in there is $9.99. And I'm like, that's their pitch. It's just like, whatever, if a company wants to sell their stuff there, it's just like, I don't care how much it costs you to make it. I'm only selling it for $9.99. And it's such a clear, and that's kind of what you're saying is like, it's tough because this is our niche. Like, this is what we can do. That 60 to 30, that's where we are. And we want to try to, we got to stay there, because if not, it's just going to get too far.
Right. It's called mission creep in the nonprofit sector, where you start off with this one thing and, there's this other thing that's kind of similar to us. So we'll doing that, and then we'll do this and we'll do that. I mean, the March of Dimes organization was started to end polio. Oh, that's solved. What do we do next?
That's right.
Love that organization too. So I'm not putting shade on March of Dimes. But mission creep tends to be a problem for a lot of nonprofit organizations and government organizations too.
So what is the current mission vision of Habitat? And do you use that to kind of help continue to stay within those lines?
So originally it was a place that was, what do they call it? Not cheap and affordable, but simple and decent housing. Well, simple started to take on connotations that weren't great. Millard Fuller didn't think air conditioning was really necessary, but that's become a pretty important thing to us now. So we've been changing what it means, and now we just say build a world where everybody has a decent place to live. What decent look like when you have how many billion people in the world? Decent can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people, and we entrust our local habitats to decide what they consider to be decent. But one example that usually confuses people is, why don't Habitat houses have parking garages? Well, we're building housing for people, not for cars. So a garage, while a lovely thing to improve your life, it extra storage, because you hardly ever actually park the car in there. Let's be real. We always park it in the driveway anyway. But it's nice extra storage. That's something that the homeowners are asked to do as they live in the home, because it's a 30-year mortgage, sometimes 40. So your needs as a family aren't going to look the same in 20 years. Your income should grow. You're basically giving them a foundation.
That's right.
And then it's up to them what they want to do with that foundation in the long term. So maintenance, improvements to the home, all of that's decided by the local people who live in those homes. And we don't tell them how they have to live their lives. If there's an HOA, that's a whole other thing. But they have the same rights and responsibilities that any traditional homeowner has. And that's a thing that a lot of people who call me don't quite understand at first. Like, why are you letting them grow their grass so high? Or why do they play music at this time of night? There's a lot of NIMBY, not in my backyard things that can come through. But they have the same trust that you should have as a homeowner. And that's important because building rental programs, you don't have that same security. You aren't building an asset that you can pass on to your kids. You don't have the control over your life that you have owning a home.
Yeah.
Less of the headaches of maintenance, of course. But yeah, so that's something that's important.
Well, and I would say, so if somebody here in Americus or in Sumter County is, really loves the story of Habitat, they're hearing you and going, yeah, I want to get involved. You don't call Zac, right? You call the local chapter. So who is the local chapter for people that are either looking for maybe some assistance, maybe they're repairs or whatever, or if they're looking to volunteer and be a part of the resources here?
Right. So their full name is New Horizons of Greater Sumter County Habitat for Humanity, Inc., or some variation of that. Just Google New Horizons Habitat, Sumter County. You'll find them. There. Yeah. Okay. They just finished their first new build since the pandemic.
Oh, that's great.
A couple of weeks ago, maybe months ago, I got to help paint the house and clean up some of the yard waste. And I was there for the homeowner celebration, which was so good.
That's so fun.
So good. So they build maybe one house every couple of years. They're still pretty small because, again, the work is equivalent to the resources of the area. We can only do with what we have. We have to be good stewards of what's given to us. So when you're a small rural area that doesn't have a high overall income, then the pie is smaller too.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that we have to try and engage with is we'd like to help everybody.
Yeah.
But and there was a push with Millard to end poverty housing. I think one of your prior guests actually talked about that. The leader, one of the leaders of the Fuller Center. So that was a thing that we did in the past. But as you said earlier, nothing is constant but change. So now building efforts here in Sumter County are handled by New Horizons, and those are the folks you want to speak with.
Okay. All right. Well, let's add on a little bit to your life, right? Because outside of Habitat, I mean, there's still some things that we don't know about, Zac. So tell us a little bit about outside of Habitat. Tell us a little bit about what you do. Where do you hang out? What is Zac's life outside of Habitat?
Oh man. Well, Zac's social life's been pretty quiet these days just because one of my best friends recently graduated from the college and moved away. So I'm kind of in mourning over that right now. Great glass blowing program is out of this world. So awesome. Yeah. But what I like to do for fun, gaming and gardening are the two go-tos. So,
nice. Is this board games?
Yeah.
Are you still in the, all right.
Board games. I did Dungeons and Dragons back in my last town. Got up to be, I think it was a level 15 rogue. Anyway.
Yeah.
But I love that type of stuff. I love doing things in the community. So I'm an active member, well, soon to be member. I'm still working at the details with Calvary Episcopal, which is over there on Lee Street by the railroad tracks. And yeah, video games too. I've been playing a lot of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom lately.
Is this computer or a console or what?
Switch console.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I was not a Zelda fan growing up. But the last two games have been great ways to just dive into a different world for a couple dozen hours. Yes. And you can come find me later.
That's funny. Yeah, I had to learn through Smash Brothers. I learned that his name was not Zelda, but Link.
Right. I still do that.
I'm thankful for Smash Brothers. So.
I still do that. Yeah, and because one of my sisters lives in Pennsylvania and another one lives in the Carolinas, this has been a way for us to still bond. So we're all playing the game in our separate consoles, and we're trading like tips, tricks, things we found, things we hate, things we love. Yeah. And it's been a great way to bond with my sisters, even though we're all so far apart these days.
Yeah. We didn't really get a chance to kind of get into the dynamics with your family, but how old are your sisters? I mean, as far as like to you?
Yeah. So I'm the eldest, and my sisters are about 4 and 6 years younger.
Okay.
Which was great growing up because they would always fight each other, which meant I was protected. I did not have to get involved in the drama, but then they became adults and mature, and now they team up against me at family reunions. I hate it.
Oh my gosh.
I hate it. And they're both super intelligent, beautiful women, and it's scary, man. They're real forces in nature. But I have nothing but love for them. I got to live with my youngest sister for a few years after she graduated from college. I invited her to be a roommate with me in Harrisburg. And I like to think that helped her kind of change from the college life to adult life. And now she makes as much money or more than I do. And I love that for her.
That's awesome. That's great. So let's talk a little bit also about one of the projects that is just kind of happening within the church itself. We had talked about a little bit this, we kind of just text back and forth, but I'd love to get a chance to kind of promote that too, because it's out. I mean, again, your life is just constantly dedicated to helping people. So tell us a little bit about something that's coming up as this probably will be airing during that time. So just be a part of that.
Yeah. So the first 2 years in Americus, I mostly spent on mastering the job. I didn't want to take on any big projects because I just wanted to make sure I spent most of my mental energy on getting good at being a specialist. But in the recent months, I've been able to start taking part in Calvary Episcopal's outreach committee. And their goal is to take the church outside and make sure it can be a part of the community it finds itself in. Churches can be kind of insular communities. They're fantastic for making great bonds with people, shared interests and beliefs. It's a very good place to build community, but it has its limits. So the outreach committee tries to do things for the community that aren't necessarily tied to spreading the gospel or, you have to believe X in order to be my friend.
Yeah.
So they were trying to come up with ideas for what to do in this year. And I riffed that we were talking about helping mothers with small kids and costs, because there's a local charity here whose name just left my mind, Helping Hands Ministry.
Okay.
And they do a lot for young mothers who have a kid and need some help because it's really expensive raising a child. So I thought, what if we, I don't know, raised a boatload of diapers? And they're like, what do you mean boatload? Well, I brought a prop.
Yeah.
This is the first donation from myself to the outreach committee.
Nice.
We haven't started fundraising yet, so don't worry. You're not behind the curve. But this little container of 22 diapers cost a lot. Go to your local store and find out. The more you buy, the cheaper it gets. So we thought if we raised a boatload of money, then the Hands of Hope could do more with that money. Economies of scale and all that jazz.
Yeah.
But how do you get excited spending money on diapers, right? How do you do that? So we've been kind of plotting and planning of how to make this an event you feel excited to be a part of. So right now we're finding a person with a boat, about a 14-foot fishing boat. We're going to plunk it down outside of Calvary Episcopal right there on Lee Street.
Yep.
And we're going to get another source that's just boxes, diaper boxes, because you're not going to leave full diaper boxes on a boat in Southwest Georgia in the summer and expect them to be worth using after a few weeks. So it's mostly decor, right? It's a prop to show how much we've raised. And then we're going to ask people to give through the Calvary website. We're going to have a little fund that you can contribute to. And we're going to reward people based on how much they give. So they'll have different levels. The lowest level that we've come up with is a bucket full of diapers, and you'll be given a pin or a sticker. We're not quite sure yet. That will be done by a local artist. That'll be like a bait bucket, just stuffed full of diapers. The next tier up is, again, this is all in the planning, so don't quote me if it's different by the time this airs. But the next level was going to be a diaper cooler. So, one of those nice big old gallon things where you would put your koozies and wine coolers in. And then the final tier is going to be a kayak of diapers, one of those sit-upon kayaks. And
wow,
each one's
yeah.
going to be, quirky, and you're going to find diapers kind of like hidden in with the sticker. But then at the end of the fundraising event, we're going to have a little parade from Calvary where we hitch up the boat and the boxes full of diapers, and we're going to ride it over to New Hope, present Helping Hands, and present a check to them for the amounts raised. And hopefully it equates to a boatload of diapers.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, when this airs, definitely, figure out. We'll post the website as well, so that people can go directly to the website and get you hooked up there.
I appreciate that, because it's hard to get the word out.
Yeah, it is, and it's a really good thing. And I remember just going through our season of our kids. I mean, it goes so fast. It is so quick. You're just like, oh, we've got like 5 bags. We're so excited because people gave, and then like 2 weeks later, we got to go get diapers. Like, this is insane. What's going on?
Oh yeah.
So you live and learn also how to use diapers and those types of things. So, but it was a great experience. But yeah, this is a great thing. So hopefully, community continue to engage in that as well. So let's look also a little bit towards the future before we kind of close up. I love thinking about future. It's vision casting, so it's really fun. It's like the funnest part. If you're a vision kind of person, you're like, oh, this is great. I don't know how we're gonna get there, but it sounds great. So when you think about the future of Americus, what are some things that are hopeful to you, that are encouraging to you? And what are some things that Americus needs to constantly wrestle with so that it can be at a healthier place, so that it can be thriving every year?
Yeah. Aspirational goal for sure.
Yeah.
So I'll preface this by saying I'm not from here. My beliefs and interests are not in alignment with the people who grew up here. So I understand if these words do not fall favorably in the ear of the listener. But y'all got to do something about your car dependency. You want 2 very different things. You want a thriving downtown that utilizes the historic infrastructure and architecture of your downtown, but you also want enough parking for the gigantic vehicles that you ride around in, singular passenger only. You can't have both. You can't. The town wasn't built for it. So you're either going to have a bunch of pockmarks in your historic downtown where you make room for all the cars that you're using, or you find alternative ways to get people around. Now, it's not giving up cars completely. No, by no means. It's just that when I bike around and I go to the suburban areas of town and I see people's residences and they live in this small house and they have more real estate inside their vehicles parked outside than they do inside their own home, that's concerning to me. That feels like a waste of time and energy. And the other thing is, it's not equal.
Yeah.
I see people who have to walk and they're left with, they're left being second-class citizens in their own town. Never mind the heat, never mind anything like that. You're walking next to vehicles that are going very, very fast, that if they collide with you, you're just gone. You're deleted from the universe.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel like a town that can bring everyone together. That's leaving out the community that I would like to see, where whoever needs help can get it when they need it. And part of that is just, if I live in A, I need to get to resources in B, C, and Q. And if I don't have a car, I'm putting my life into my own hands each time I go to do basic necessities or hang out with a friend. I mentioned that I love Koinonia, but I can't see them unless I'm using a motorcycle to get there. They're 9 miles away. I can do it by bicycle if I felt safe enough to do so. But I mean, there are some really confident people who will ride bicycles out there, and they've got the right equipment and radar and a lightweight bicycle. But even with all of that, they're still at risk. So things Americus needs to do. If you have to ask yourself first, which do I value more? A vibrant downtown where everybody can get to know each other and that everybody can do the things they want to do in this town? Or do I want to only take travel in my car or truck or mostly trucks and SUVs and muscle cars too. But that's the question, is what do you value more as a community? That's going to be a hard conversation to have with themselves. But honestly, if you want college students to stay here, I've listened to pretty much every one of your podcasts before this. If you want college students to stay, if you want them to feel like they're a part of the community, right now, Georgia Southwestern University is completely isolated by a ring of parking lots that surround the campus. If they want to do anything in town, they have to drive, which is bonkers because most of your commutes, most of your trips in Americus are less than 3 miles. An electric scooter, a smaller vehicle, car sharing services where you just borrow a car when you need it. There's a lot of different ways that you can decrease your dependency on cars and take away some of that budget on, repaving and increasing the lane distances and everything else. And you can use a much smaller amount of that to take care of bicycling and walking infrastructure, because both of those cost a whole lot less than maintaining roads for cars.
Yeah.
So that's something that's going to be vital if you want to see your downtown actually feel like a downtown. I'm also really grateful for the investment we've seen, like Chick-fil-A and all those other businesses, the Spot that'll be opening up sometime now. You've interviewed the owner of that.
Yeah, Yorka.
Incredible person. My gosh. I've listened to that one twice.
Yeah.
But
she's got grit, man.
Yeah, she does. Tenacity for sure. But essentially, you need to make it feel like anyone can get to it without a car. That's probably the number one thing. And then also there's an uncomfortable dialogue that has to happen as well. You mentioned everybody knows everybody. That's not true. It's still very much separate. When I first moved here, I couldn't find a church home that I really felt I could be a part of. I went to dozens of churches in town, and everyone, I could sense a message of love. I could sense, a Christian desire to help others. But I also could sense that there was this part of Americus and there was this part of the Americus. And if I was in one church, I felt like I was very, very welcome. But if I went to another church, I felt like I didn't line up with their expectation of a congregation member. They loved having me though, because there needs to be more conversation of who knows who. And if you think you know everybody that needs to be known, who are you leaving out?
Yeah.
Because that's a huge issue. When I was reading about the history of Americus, learning about Cotton Avenue where I live and how that used to be a vital pillar of the Black community here. And now it's mostly parking and empty places for lease. That's really tragic to see. But you have Lee Street and other streets named after Confederate generals where you have these lovely homes that are in great shape. And I'm really glad to be a part of that and to be able to walk that. But I still see a physical disconnect between the north part of town and the south part of town. And I can hear friends talk about the good parts of Americus while putting on blinders to the things that are really not great. And that's, if you want this place to be a community where you can be better neighbors of each other, you have to have conversations that you don't want to have, that will feel awkward and you'll say the wrong thing. And, you'll have to step away from a friendship for a bit because you rubbed them the wrong way. But vitally important because you don't have a lot of resources here.
Yeah.
You can't afford to split them up any further than they already are. If you want this place to thrive and to feel like a welcoming community for the people of Southland and the people of Americus Sumter High School, and they want to all be part of Americus and Sumter County, something's got to shift.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, you need that. You need that outside perspective, and because people kind of get used to and that things just become normal, or what's easier is that it just becomes, everyone knows it, but becomes passive about it. And they just don't know how to engage. And so I really appreciate you sharing that. And I think some people feel that, they know what you're describing, and they're still maybe they're trying to wrestle with, okay, but what's the first step?
Yeah.
What is the first step? How do I get to that? To this beautiful reality of like, yeah, we need to have hard conversations, but we're also living in a world where if you disagree with me 25 years ago, if you disagree with me, I just thought you were a loser or a fool or whatever. And I would go, but now if I disagree with you, it's almost like you're evil.
You're a madman.
You're a bad person.
Yeah.
So it's really, really difficult to take the time to be able to say, all right, you need to know who I am because we're going to have conversations. And I want to let you know that I'm not going to leave, but I don't know how you feel about me going to, maybe disagree with you on a particular issue. And so it's very, very important. And especially right now where things are so tense, you can ask a very simple question to half of the people and say, who did you vote for? And then at that moment, you already are categorized. It doesn't even matter. You're in a category that someone else puts you in, and you don't get a chance to define who you are and the decisions that you've made. It's no, this is who you are. This is, so I think it is important that we get there. I think it is hard to have difficult conversations. You've got to be willing to lose. And I don't mean lose in the sense of an argument necessarily, but lose, which is great too. But what I've noticed is there are a few people that need to lose so that other people can win in a larger scale. And that's just a really hard conversation to have of wherever the resources are, wherever the conversation is, wherever the influence is, we got to be able to disperse that. So how do we do that? And we got to build trust. And it's a very difficult thing to do. So, which is why we talk a little bit about neighboring and things like that, because if we don't do it on the small scale, if we can't do it, and I don't mean necessarily just your neighbor that's right across the street from you, but we are neighbors here as well. So creating spaces to do that would be very, very healthy. Mm-hmm. And then maybe modeling it too, which is why the podcast is here. I've even talked to local pastors about having discussions about, racial reconciliation. What does that look like? Where are we in terms of that? As far as the church culture is concerned, as far as the city culture is concerned, those conversations need to happen, and people need to be able to see it and go, "Oh, you don't have to start yelling. Oh, you don't have to just automatically agree." But it's got to be modeled, and it's very hard.
Yeah, because we are creatures that can have, a group of about 100 people in our lives where we can kind of make sense of those relationships and who they are. And again, we tend to pattern ourselves off the people who look like us. It's an easier way to make your way through the world. And it's hard enough to make friends like that. Mm-hmm. We're a very isolated culture. It's hard to connect and have straight talk with people, even if they look like us and talk like us. It can still be difficult, even if they're on the wrong sports team. Mm-hmm. By the way, I'm still from Pennsylvania, so Steelers and Eagles over y'all's teams. Forgive me.
Well, y'all picked up a bunch of Georgia folks, so we're happy for y'all.
Even that sentence I just spoke, where I identified the teams I root for, even that can cause us to stop talking to each other. So the important thing, if you want to effectuate change, if you want to be one of these people, 2 easy suggestions for a very difficult journey. And it's not going to solve everything, but it'll get you started. 1, if you go to church every Sunday, one of those Sundays of the month, go to a different church. One that you don't think you'll like. One that you feel like you're not welcome there. Go there and see that you're wrong. They want you there, that they're happy to have you there, that they're going to ask you to their potluck afterwards. Like that's going to happen. Yeah. And it's a good way to break down the barriers that you've built up in your brain, that this is how people are, and that's how you've been told they are. Just being there with them changes that whole narrative. Yeah. I had the same issue with the Harrisburg Young Professionals. We were primarily white and upper middle class. And we thought that we could make Harrisburg a better place to live, work, and play. We still think that. But there was a group of people who felt that they weren't welcome in that conversation. And they created the Young Professionals of Color. And now they're working together, but they're still their own separate organizations. So it's not that we have to sing Kumbaya and all share the same group. It's okay to have subcultures and things that you feel welcome at and that you feel like you're a part of. You don't have to go to everything, but one Sunday a month, just go to a different church, talk to someone. Something number 2, whenever you have a conversation, don't give opinions, ask questions.
Yeah.
Why do you feel like that? Okay, I feel that this is what's happening. Can you tell me why you think differently? Those types of probing ways, and being willing to recognize that you might not be right in every occasion. That's one of the hardest for me.
Yeah.
I'm a know-it-all.
Yeah.
So being willing to be wrong, asking questions, and just simply being in the same physical space as someone who is unlike yourself. Those 3 things are a great start.
Yeah.
It's not going to do everything.
Yeah.
You're going to have to keep at it. It's just like exercise or working a new muscle.
Yeah.
But if you want to build a community where we're all a part of this, those are 3 steps.
Yeah, I love that. And I'll just add one is find grounds where you agree and rejoice about it. Celebrate it. It's like, man, this is great. You know, where we agree, we can actually celebrate. And I feel like that would be another addition to that would be really helpful.
Yeah, very good.
No, Zac, thank you so much, man. Well, let's go ahead. We're going to do kind of our little segment of kind of rapid fire questions as we kind of close up. And so, you know, some of these you may have already heard if you've listened to a few times, but we'll go ahead and throw some of these at you. So I'm going to ask you, because I know you're a book reader, what is your favorite book, or at least your top 3? I don't want to pin you down.
Oh, yeah. Top 3 books. Heavens. So, I'm a basic kid. I like the Mistborn series, which is by Brandon Sanderson. I forget the name of the first book. My middle sister's going to kill me for that because she knows that author inside and out and sideways. But Mistborn series, which I know is not a book technically, it's a series. Whatever. Let's not be technical. Monstrous Regiment, which is one of the books of the Discworld series. Okay. I won't give it away, but it's a riot and so much fun, and pokes fun of the real world through its fantasy, satire. So Monstrous Regiment, and of course Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, because that's what got me started in learning. And he was 11 when I was 11, so there's that bond.
Look
there.
at that. That's cool.
So definitely the Harry Potter series, but specifically the Sorcerer's Stone, because it opened up the whole world of book reading for me.
Yeah, this world. What are you reading a book right now? What's the current book that you're reading?
So one of the downsides to ADHD is you tend to be reading 7 books at the same time. But I'm reading one about permaculture, which teaches you how to grow food in your own backyard and do so in a way that requires
gardening. You were just talking about gaming and gardening. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a way to not completely get rid of your food bill, but implement more sustainable veggies and other things, and the plants all build off of each other. Think like the whole 3 sisters of the indigenous culture. So corn, bean, and squash, just like amplify that to 11 using modern science and our understanding of plants and how the soil works. Really geeky stuff. Loving every second of it. I'm also reading a book about Millard Fuller, which I think it's called The Knowledge of the Hammer. So I'm reading that bit by bit. And then I'm reading one that I got from the library. But by the way, the library doesn't just let you borrow books. They have like a for sale section. That's cool. You can get paperbacks for 10 cents. And I think it's called An Erotic Punjabi Story in London or something like that. Okay. Essentially, the short version is a bunch of Pakistani women who now live in London, in a subculture of London, are pretending to learn how to write in English, but really they're sharing erotic fantasies that, as widows of their culture, nobody gives a second look at them, but they still want love and they still want to be, loved in return. So this is a way for them to try and do that. And there's also a whole murder mystery thing in the background.
Nice. Yeah. It's all kind of set. Yeah. That's right. Right. That's awesome. Okay. If you could be an expert of anything new right now, what would it be?
Anything new right now? I really wish I understood more about the modular housing. So it's something that we're exploring at different Habitat affiliates, but like how to build at scale those houses that you just kind of plop down on the land and poof, it's done. So that way we can build a lot more for a lot less money. So I really wish I knew more about how that worked. Luckily, there are other people at Habitat that do understand that far better than me. And I just passed the call along to them. I really wish I knew more about it.
That's awesome. All right. If you had to delete all but 3 apps from your smartphone, which ones would you keep?
I would give up the phone.
Nice.
I cannot live on just 3 apps. I
Okay,
researched.
Yeah, you're like, no, I need it. I need more.
I researched that question before this.
Come on.
And I looked at all of my different apps. I'm like, well, that one's Headspace is great for meditation. I need this one to run my electric helmet. I need this one to run the unicycle. I need this one to water my plants on time. So I'd give up the whole phone and just go with a flip phone at that point and just go to like a simple journal after
all
that.
Or nothing, man. I like it. I like it. Okay. So you described some of your activities, gaming and gardening. Are those also parts of your relaxation? Like if I were to ask, how do you relax? What does that look like to you?
Yeah. So video games are an easy way to relax for me. Seems like streaming anime and other things that don't really require much brain activity to enjoy.
Yeah.
But gardening is super relaxing. There's a small community garden bed at the farmer's market down the street. Nobody has been using it. So I just decided, let's go ahead and plant some peppers and sweet potatoes and let's see what survives. And
nice.
I'm devastated to say the first harvest was actually taken by someone other than me.
Okay.
We don't know who it was, and they're there for the community. So I knew some of the fruits would be taken by someone else. But it was sad to see that every single pepper had been plucked from the plant. So I might have to pivot to things that are a little bit less easy to spot from a distance, that they're ready to be harvested.
Okay.
But yeah, that's something I've been doing just to experiment and relax a bit.
That's awesome. What about favorite restaurants? Where do you like to eat?
Oh man. If I had all the money in the world, I'd eat every brunch at Rosemary and Thyme.
Nice.
Those folks are ridiculously good food. And that's coming from a guy who lived in the capital of Pennsylvania, where politicians and lobbyists had like a really good gastronomic scene. So like if I'm saying a restaurant is good, eat good.
That's awesome.
So yeah, if I could eat every brunch I ever could.
I tried to Google you to try to, see if I can find some references, articles and stuff. And like, there was like one Google review from you. And I think it was like a local place over here. I can't remember how it didn't say how long.
Diner. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're super. If you're ever starving after a church session, Medea's Diner is superb. Huge helpings, cafeteria style. I was a bit confused because I'd never really gone to a restaurant that has cafeteria style seating. But I've met some of the best people in this town just sitting there, watching a game on their screens, eating dinner or lunch, maybe second lunch. I don't know. I can eat a lot there.
That's awesome. All right. What are people most likely to misunderstand about you?
Golly, I misunderstand a lot about myself, honestly. So I would say I'm not trying to be clever. I'm not trying to be a person who thinks he has every answer. I tend to info dump. ADHD is one of those neurodivergent things where I sometimes have trouble connecting with others. And so I might misread a situation or I might mask my true self in order to try and fit in better. I'm very sensitive to rejection. So sometimes I'll go too far to try and make sure you like me. And I'm not trying to be difficult or that I'm not. And if I ghost you, again, something shiny has just distracted me for a bit. I promise I'll be back. But there are times where the dopamine high is just too great. And I'll lose a weekend to Zelda. So I don't mean to. I'm very sorry if it happens, if we're friends, but that's just something that can cause trouble.
I've been encouraged. For all of your trying to process. I mean, you are in my opinion, you're a very self-aware person. Like you're able to acknowledge these things and, walk through them. Obviously we're all kind of learning more and more about who we are and things like that. But man, your self-awareness is pretty encouraging. And I hope more people kind of dive into that as well and say, hey, who am I? What kind of my personalities? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? So thank you for that. All right. Let me ask you this. What would be, this is the last question, what would be the title of your autobiography? What would that be? At this point.
Written after I'm gone. I've seen a lot of history to know that people like to name things after themselves. People want to be known for a project. I would be happy to leave this earth with no one ever remembering my name. And instead, my actions are what help them live their lives better. I don't want a street. I don't want a bridge or some other nonsensical political thing. So if I am not remembered and there's no autobiography, I'll be happy because I know from the stories and narratives of other people's lives that I've been able to make it better. I'm not a main character. I don't want to be a main character. I mean, we read plenty of books where we identify with the hero of the story and everyone else is a background bit.
Yeah.
I don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
I want to be the shopkeep that gives you that one item you really needed when you needed it. And then you went on to conquer the world.
Yeah.
That's how I want to have my book written.
That's awesome. That's super encouraging, man.
Thanks.
Well, Zac, man, we really appreciate you coming on the podcast, sharing a little bit of your story, coming in, and just working here, and just being, man, a person that wants to see Americus win and thrive and recognize things that are sometimes difficult, and willing to have conversations. And so thank you so much for that. Hopefully we can even continue to dive deeper into conversations as people come on. And so maybe we can even have you back on the podcast for some of these deep dives, whether it be habitat and kind of where they're going, or just on a personal level with neighboring and how do we connect and what are some things that we could do to kind of see this city become more and more transparent with one another, caring for one another, and having those difficult conversations. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate you.
It's been a blast to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome.
And this is the post part where our voices fade away and we talk about nonsensical things. Right. I love that part of it. And it's never the same for each. There's always a different level and how long it lasts until it fades away.
Probably you just let that go, man. You just let it go.
It's great.